haunting of the boy in the walls. Home is supposed to be a sanctuary. 4 walls to keep the world out. A roof to protect you from the night. A place where the locks on the doors mean safety and the silence means peace. But what happens when silence is broken by something you can't explain? At first, it's just a sound, a dull knock that could be the pipes or the wind or the house shifting in the cold. You tell yourself that. You want to believe that, but the sound doesn't stop. It repeats. It grows louder until you realize it isn't random. It's patterned. It's deliberate, almost as if someone is knocking back. You search the rooms. You check the doors and the windows. Everything is locked. Everything looks untouched, and yet the sound keeps coming from the walls, from the very bones of your home. And then one night, you find something even harder to explain. Words, jagged, uneven words scrawled across the walls of your own bedroom. Messages that don't belong. Messages that you didn't write. Messages that taunt you, that mock your fear, that tell you someone is inside, watching. Your home no longer feels like your own. The air grows heavy. Shadows seem to linger longer than they should. Every creak in the floor makes your skin crawl. Every whisper of wind against the glass makes your pulse race. Because deep down, you know this isn't just your imagination. And then, the moment that shatters every fragile excuse you've told yourself, a figure steps out. Not a ghost, not a nightmare conjured by sleepless nights, but a boy with an axe in his hands. A boy whose eyes don't hold fear, but hunger. This is not folklore. This isn't an urban legend whispered at sleepovers or a story told to scare children on Halloween night. This is real. This is the story of a predator who blurred the line between the supernatural and the all-too-human. Someone who didn't just invade a home. He lived inside of it. Tonight, we pull back the veil on one of the most unsettling cases that you'll ever hear. A case where safety was stripped away, walls were turned into cages, and fear itself became flesh and blood. Because sometimes the most terrifying thing in the world isn't what waits for you outside in the dark. Sometimes it's already here, already listening, already watching, already in the walls. Hey, Angela, how's it going?
Hi, John. It's okay. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah.
Trying to get back to some semblance of normality, but yeah, I'm good.
We'll get there. We're on our way.
We will get there. So, tonight we begin our October series dedicated solely to you.
And I didn't know it was happening, and I'm very, very grateful.
Yeah. And so, while we're going to focus this month on some really freaking creepy, weird-ass true crime stories.
The main show.
Yes, the main show. Everything else will remain like it is, but
right.
Dark Dialogue main show is going to do something a little bit different for October. But still, we're talking about true cases, we're talking about real things, and we're talking about real victims. So, as always, they are the focus,
Yeah.
It's just...
And there will be asshats.
Oh, yes, there will be. We've got quite the asshat to talk about tonight, so... Oh, yes. There's always asshats. There's no shortage of asshats ever.
That's true.
But welcome back, listeners, to Dark Dialogue, where we dive into the mysteries that haunt small towns and big cities alike. I'm your host, John.
And I'm Angela. And as we just discussed, I love October. the chill in the air, there's the long nights, the creepy stories. Halloween is up there with my favorite time of year.
Yeah.
I could live it all year if people would let me.
I know you could. October is Angela's happy place.
Yes.
And this month, we're leading into the season with cases that feel like horror stories come to life. Stories that will have you questioning the knocks in your walls, the words scratched across your bedroom door, and the shadows that move when you're sure you're alone.
But as much as we embrace the creepy side of these cases, we also want to remind you our focus never changes. It's always about the victims and about telling their stories with the respect they deserve.
Exactly. And tonight's case is one of the eeriest that we've ever told. It's the story of Danny LaPlante, a teenager who turned homes into hunting grounds and who proved that sometimes the real horror isn't out in the dark. It's already inside.
But before we dive in, don't forget to hit that like button, give us a thumbs up, and share this episode with your friends, especially your creepy friends.
Yes. And if you haven't already, subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. Leave us a review. It really helps keep the dialogue alive.
You can also be part of our community, support the show on Patreon or Ko-fi, or join us through the Dark Dialogue Collective to help with victim advocacy and research.
So settle in. Maybe turn out the lights if you're feeling brave. Remember, when it comes to Danny LaPlante, the scariest part wasn't what lurked outside. It was what was already in the walls. So, Angela, you finally get to do some location information.
I did.
And you have a lot this month.
Yeah.
I've got another one for you right now. I got a new one.
Oh, man.
Yeah, you got
He's
a
on
lot. You're going to be busy the month of October.
Nice.
So tell us about where we're going tonight.
Pepperell, Massachusetts. And I really hope I'm pronouncing all of these things correctly.
I think so. Oh, that one I think you're pronouncing correctly.
Yeah, but as I was looking at this other stuff, vowels are hard.
That's
They can be whatever they want. So
100%.
we're just going to go with what we think and please don't be offended. So according to the town's website, Pepperell has a rich colonial history and was very active in the independence movement, sweeping the colonies.
Yeah, this is back where shit's old.
This is
old for the United States.
This is your happy place.
Yes,
John.
it is.
So a direct quote from how it was named was also cited, so I will share that here. Quote begins, on the 12th day of April, 1753, by Act of General Court, Groton West Parish, upon petition by its inhabitants, was made a district and named Pepperell in honor of Sir William Pepperell, the hero of the memorable capture of Louisbourg.
I think so.
I think so too. In 1745. Reverend Mr. Emerson, who had been the chaplain in that expedition, probably suggested the name of his old commander as an appropriate for the new district. Sir William acknowledged the compliment by the customary present of a bell, which, however, was never received by those for whom it was intended. Sir William always spelled his name with 2 R's, and for many years the name of the town was so spelled. End quote.
Interesting.
However, it now appears that they've since dropped one of the R's. Maybe the R's are expensive.
Apparently, yes.
Several citations have been listed as to why this area has significant Revolutionary War history, so we'll consider the following. August 29th, 1774, the raising of the Liberty Pole and the first American flag flown in open defiance against the crown.
Wow, that's pretty huge. I didn't know that.
You did not know that?
No, that's really freaking cool.
I might have information you didn't know.
You definitely do. That's way freaking cool.
I'm betting you know the rest of this information.
We'll see.
On April 19th, 1775, several Pepperell men went to the Old North Bridge in Concord, the site of the infamous shot heard round the world, marking the start of the Revolutionary War. He's shaking his head, so he knew this.
Yes, I did.
Prudence Wright, said to be an amazing woman, led other women to guard Pepperell's covered bridge, resulting in the capture of a British spy.
I didn't know that, but that's a cool story too.
I keep looking, like, does he shake his head? Did he know? June 17th, 1775, Colonel William Prescott was the commander at the Battle of Bunker Hill, said to be one of the bloodiest battles of the American Revolution, with over 1,500 casualties combined between both sides. This would be where Colonel Prescott was cited for giving the famous command that I'm sure John will say with me, don't fire till you see the whites of their eyes. Do you know why that was said?
I don't know.
It is said that he said that to conserve ammo and provide accuracy on the shots. So the census records indicate that by 1850, there were 1,754 residents, growing to 10,098 people in 1990, which is near-ish where this story takes place.
Yeah.
It is estimated to have 11,710 residents in the year 2023.
So, a relatively small town.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So, we're going to start by talking about a couple of sisters, the Bowen sisters. So, Tina Bowen and her sister Karen's early lives were marked by both childhood innocence and profound tragedy, all taking place in the small community of Pepperell, Massachusetts. So, Tina Bowen was born in May of 1972, and her younger sister Karen was born in May of 1978. So the children were raised by their parents, Frank Bowen, and their mother, whose name I really couldn't find the mom's name. And then there was also mention of a third sister, Kathy, who was adopted into the family and was close to the age of Tina, but I really couldn't find anything else about that in any other coverage of this case that I've watched, read, listened to. I never heard her mentioned at all. So I don't know really what the whole story is with that, but I wanted to mention it because I did find that.
So far in my love for creepy, I don't know this story, so I'm pretty interested to hear you
freaking creepy.
Tell us about it. It's so creepy you talk through your teeth.
It's freaking creepy. So the greatest trauma of their young lives was the death of their mother, who passed away from cancer when Tina was around 12 and Karen was around 6, which would place the death around late 1984, early 1985, right in that time there. So this loss had a massive impact on the girls.
The story's not very old then.
No, 80s.
Yeah.
I mean, it was extraordinarily traumatic for the girls. Of course, they lost their mother. And not only grieving their mother, but also dealing with the sudden vacuum in the family support and in their daily structure, and every child that loses a parent goes through this. It's not just that the parent's gone. It's the absence of everything that parent did in the family.
Yeah.
So after their mother's passing, Frank had to become the sole provider, the single dad and the breadwinner. So this meant that he had to work long hours, which left the girls frequently alone at home after school. And everything that I learned about this guy, he was a freaking stand-up dude, and he just stepped up and did what he had to do. But this is the reality of it, when as single parents, both of us can attest that, it's tough. And when you have, a 12-year-old who is the age where, kids are going to start babysitting anyways and stuff.
Yeah.
It wasn't, I don't think, at all irresponsible for Frank to, leave the girls alone while he had to go out and work so he could keep a roof over their heads and stuff. And so the family was described as exceptionally close before the mother's illness. And mom was the emotional anchor of the home, which is so often the case, and losing her put Frank, Tina, and Karen in unique positions of grief. So Frank struggled to balance grieving for his wife and being present for his daughters all while being the sole provider for the family. So, I mean, as every single parent knows, it's a huge load on your shoulders. And thank God I didn't have to go through grieving my spouse on top of that.
Right.
I was celebrating the fact that I didn't have a spouse. So that made it a little bit easier for me. But
yeah, that does take one aspect out of it.
You know, when it's got to be extremely hard anyway when you lose your spouse, and then to go through being thrust into being a single parent on top of that, it's just a lot, you know. And then Tina, who was entering her early teen years, became susceptible to loneliness and a yearning for connection outside of the family, especially as her father had less time at home. And so the sisters relied heavily on one another for emotional comfort and stability, spending much time together after school, with Tina taking on the caretaker role for Karen and maybe Kathy too. But again, I don't know about Kathy. So by the time Daniel LaPlante initiated contact in 1986, the Bowen home was marked by the recent sorrow, emotional vulnerability, and a longing for stability. And Tina's need for companionship intensified in the period following her mother's death, making her engage with LaPlante when he called her just out of the blue and described himself as a pleasant, attractive peer. So we'll get into it, but it's the interesting aspect of this case is it is kind of the first internet story before the internet existed.
Okay.
It's freaking weird. The whole story is weird as shit. So just in summary, the Bowen sisters' childhood before their mother's death was stable and loving, but her untimely passing set off a cascade of grief that affected the family's emotional climate, their daily life, and ultimately their exposure to danger from outsiders like Danny LaPlante. So in mid-1986, Daniel LaPlante, who was then a high school student in the same area as Tina, somehow obtained her phone number. We don't know how. And so some accounts believe that he did this by burglarizing their home and getting their information. Others suggest that he got the number from maybe a mutual friend or an acquaintance, or maybe he just looked it up, because this is in the era of phone books.
Yeah, phone books.
That, you know, if you're young, maybe you don't understand, but they did used to exist where everybody's phone number, for the most part, was listed unless you had a unlisted number. But
now getting somebody's phone number is more difficult. Back then, not as much.
Yeah, not as much at all. So LaPlante,
and address was in that book too.
Oh yeah, your phone number and address. Yeah. Absolutely. It's, to think about it is insane.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's like watch Back to the Future when Marty goes in and tears the page out of the book with Doc Brown's address on it. You know, that's really what
John F. Kennedy Drive. Who's John F. Kennedy?
Exactly. Yeah. So then LaPlante starts calling Tina and occasionally Karen, and he introduced himself as Danny and claimed that he was tall and athletic. He said he was like I think the quarterback of the football team or something. I mean, he was a football player.
But they would have known, correct?
Well, he went to a different school than that.
Oh.
So, yeah. So
convenience. Got it.
Right. Well, I think that, so Tina would have been in, I'm guessing it was probably junior high at this time, just starting into junior high, because she was like 13 or something like that. So, this would have, I'm guessing, I don't ever remember hearing of middle school back then. I can't speak about Massachusetts, but out here, definitely not. It was junior high. I'm assuming that she would have been in junior high and Danny was in high school. So no matter what, they would have been in two different schools, you know? Okay. And so he could tell her anything. Right. And he did. So he
did, yeah.
Big, tall, strong, good-looking, athletic football player who was super popular, and he went to a nearby school. And he charmed Tina with friendly, seemingly thoughtful conversations. And she was lonely and still grieving the loss of her mother. So she found the attention flattering and comforting. And over multiple calls, they developed a rapport that felt close to a budding teen romance.
Okay.
After several weeks of talking on the phone on a pretty much daily basis, LaPlante asked Tina to join him for a date at a local fair, and she accepted. And, obviously, you were a young teen girl. You could see her. She's all excited and trying to pick out the perfect dress or whatever. And, like her first date with the cute boy. And so when he arrived at the Bowen home, Tina was immediately jarred by the reality. LaPlante was the polar opposite of what he had described.
Yeah.
Instead of being clean-cut, confident, athletic, she was greeted by a thin, pale, dark-haired, greasy boy with disheveled, almost an unkempt look. And so this is what I say when I said that this is like your first internet thing before.
Your first catfish.
She was catfished.
Yeah.
100%. And this was back before any of us even knew what the hell that meant.
Yeah.
It's strange because in the internet world, you can catfish somebody just kind of like the Tom McDonald tall, hot blonde situation we talked about, with no real indication that you're ever going to actually meet them. Mm-hmm. So you can catfish it. You can keep that shit going for years.
But this guy, was he smart?
Yeah. How do you catfish and then set up a date? It's just...
And show up to it.
Right. It's just so bizarre. To your point, you really would have expected him to have a tragic accident or something that made him cancel at the very last moment. Or, he showed up at the door and was like, hi.
Didn't even try either.
Yeah. But despite her shock and disappointment, Tina, who is a sweet girl, trying to be polite, she agreed to keep the date to avoid any confrontation or anything. So during their time at the fair, Tina found LaPlante to be awkward and oddly fixated on her recently deceased mother. Instead of light conversation that you would expect on the first teenage. Well, they had been talking on the phone for quite a while, so she had shared all of this stuff with him. But instead of the light conversation that you think would be occurring at a first date for teenagers, LaPlante asked Tina very personal and pretty intrusive questions about her mother's death, repeatedly asking for specific details on what her mother's final days were like and how the family felt and how Tina had coped with it emotionally. It was a freaking creeper.
Yeah.
And so Tina began to feel increasingly uncomfortable, obviously, and disturbed by his apparent obsession with her most intense tragedy.
Yeah.
Which seemed to go far beyond any kind of normal curiosity or sympathy. And the date, which lasted just over an hour, became pretty tense and uneasy. And so Tina finally was politely extradited herself from this situation. And she got home as quick as she possibly could. Because, you know what it's like. She was getting creeper vibes, and she's like, I got to get away from this freaking lunatic.
Yep.
So Tina did not agree to ever see LaPlante again after this weird-ass date, and she chose not to answer or return any of his calls. She ghosted him in today's lingo, right? But
the first catfish, the first ghosting.
Right. But this was not the last that she was going to hear from Danny LaPlante. His obsession had just begun, and he would soon escalate this intrusion from phone calls to an eventual infamous secret occupation of their home. So the courtship, if you can call it that, between Tina and Danny was really short-lived, but very pivotal. It started with a lie, rapidly turned very uncomfortable and triggered a sequence of events that devolved with emotional manipulation to outright horror. So during the months leading up to what would become the final confrontation, the Bowen family endured a deeply disturbing campaign of psychological terror that pushed the boundaries of what would later become known as frogging, or living undetected inside someone else's home. So after this weird ass creepy date, Danny's obsession escalated, and he used his skills as a burglar to gain entry to the Bowen home on Lawrence Street in Pepperell, Massachusetts. And once inside, he discovered an extremely cramped crawl spaces, and some reportedly were only a few inches wide. And he constructed a network of tunnels that allowed him to move unseen throughout the home. He drilled peepholes so that he could like look in on Tina's room and stuff. And he established hiding spots that allowed him to monitor the family's activities in secret. So his campaign began in earnest after Tina and her sister Karen, who were trying to cope with their mother's death, decided to hold a seance. And so they used a Ouija board and attempted to contact her. And LaPlante was spying and saw this, and then he exploited it. And so then he started staging this ghostly phenomena to try to terrify the girls. So shortly after they held this seance, then they started hearing like rhythmic knocking and tapping from within the walls of the house. And the girls obviously, they initially interpreted this as their mom trying to communicate with them.
Yeah.
And so frequent and aggressive banging often woke the girls up when they were sleeping at night, and it started to disrupt their daily life. Objects around the house would move inexplicably. Sometimes he would like rearrange the furniture, and other times food would disappear from the kitchen or change location. Household items would appear in like odd places. Lights started flickering, TV channels changing without explanation, as well as, you know, episodes of like food and drinks and stuff disappearing. And like I said, the girls thought this was their mom haunting them.
Right.
Essentially. And then taunting messages that were scrawled using ketchup, mayonnaise, and shaving cream started showing up on the walls. Stuff like, "I'm in your room, come and find me," and "marry me." And during periods of disappearance, it would then say, "I'm back, find me if you can." So, you know, this shit would go on for a while, and then they wouldn't have anything happening for a little bit. And then a message saying, "I'm back, come find me," would show up on their walls. And then they found
condiments.
Yeah, ketchup primarily.
Wonderful.
And then a knife was found stabbed into the wall, pinning a Bowen family photo. And then further acts of vandalism, such as a bathtub full of urine.
Yeah, mom's not doing this, people.
Yeah, right. And so there, a bathtub full of urine, pennies scattered all over the floor, just shit like that. Just weird. I mean, the bathtub full of urine is exceptionally strange, but
yeah,
obviously, you know, during this time, the girls, you know, went to Dad and was like, Dad, and he's like, and I can understand exactly where this guy was at. You know, at first he was like, okay, you know, and then the girl said that they did this seance, and then he's like, damn it, quit scaring yourself.
Yeah.
Stop doing this shit. And then more stuff would happen, and he would be like, you guys have got to stop this shit. You're just scaring yourselves. I've had this conversation with my kids, you know, when they're in telling scary stories or something, and then all of a sudden they're hearing shit, and you're like, you're just scaring yourself. There's nothing in the
And
walls.
all of a sudden, they're all sleeping on your floor.
Right.
Mhm.
Yes. But I think every parent has gone through this.
Yeah.
And you just know what's happening. And you're less like, would you just stop? And
The problem is I scared Steven more than he scared himself.
that doesn't surprise me at all. But obviously, Frank blamed the girls for
Yeah.
putting the messages up, for doing all of the stuff. And
Opening themselves up and causing problems. Yeah.
right. And, I mean, it's easy to be critical of the guy, but if you really put yourself in his situation, I know that he was like, you rationalize this. My reaction would be exactly the same. I would be like, these girls have gone through a serious trauma. They lost their mom. I'm busy. I'm working all the freaking time. They're alone. They're crying out for attention. They're trying to get my attention. That's logical. I think every parent can understand that mindset.
Exactly.
Like, yeah, okay, I get where he's coming from. So, he was like, he actually did what any responsible parent would do. He got them into counseling so that they could get past their mother's death, which he was sure was the cause of all this. So for a dad in the 80s to get his girls into counseling, like that wasn't near as popular and accepted as it is now.
And it's barely accepted now.
And, back then, especially with men, the approach would have been 9 times out of 10. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, stop doing this shit, and let's get on with life. That was really a normal response from a father in that time period and before. So hats off again to this guy for not doing that, for understanding that his daughters were really struggling with some emotions that are hard for any person to go through, but especially young kids, and to get them into counseling. So, I mean, I was really impressed by the guy. I think he was a really good dad and trying to do the very best he could do. But it didn't help. And the girl's fear only grew more as the hauntings escalated. And so, then he was like, well, maybe we need to move. Maybe being in the house that their mom lived in with them is the cause of this. And so he began really thinking of selling the house and moving. And he even talked about, well, actually, they found the phone lines had been cut. And that's when Dad started being like, okay, so did my daughters cut the phone lines, or is there some truth in what they're telling me?
Yeah.
And he started thinking like, okay, maybe something is going on here. He was starting to kind of question whether it was his daughters trying to get attention or if his daughters were actually being tormented by something or someone. And then the terror culminated on the night of December 8th, 1986. So the Bowens returned home that evening to find, well, actually the girls came home first and they found radios all over the house, the televisions all like cranked up as high as they could go and on like the static channels.
Oh,
so it's like
that show
everywhere, as loud as it can be from every radio, and probably the only TV in the house because it is 1986 when we used to only have one.
Yeah.
The house was ransacked. There was the telltale signs that someone had been in there, such as a used unflushed toilet in the basement and a new message.
This guy was nice.
Yeah. And a new message on Tina's bedroom wall that said, "Marry me, Tina." So the girls freaked, obviously. They ran to the neighbor's house.
Saying that shit either.
No. They ran to the neighbor's house. Neighbor called Frank and said, "Oh, you need to get over here." Frank came home from work and he went in to search the home, and he was, going through the home, going through every room and all this. And he opened a closet and he came face to face with Danny LaPlante. And Danny was wearing a dress and he was painted, his body was painted with condiments, his favorite ketchup, mustard, mayonnaise, weird shit.
It's making fry sauce.
He had like used it to rub in his hair and make his hair spiky with like ketchup mousse or
man.
whatever you want to say.
Where were his parents?
Well, yeah, we'll get there. But, and then, and he was holding an axe in his hands, and he came out after Frank, and he ordered the family into a bedroom, but Frank was like, kiss my ass, and he barricaded the door, and then he had Tina jump from a second-story window, and so then the police were called, obviously, and they come in, and after evacuating the family, they searched the home, and they found Daniel hiding in a crawl space in the walls, in the foundation, and they found all his weird-ass little tunnels connecting different areas of the house, and all the evidence of his extremely elaborate and disturbing occupation of the home. Then, obviously, the little freaking psychopath is arrested. And no, I mean, he is a freaking psychopath for sure. The little psychopath was freaking arrested and everything, right? And Frank and his family left the house to just temporarily. They stayed somewhere else. I couldn't find if they had like
family or something.
Yeah, if they'd stayed with family or if they just got in a motel room or what. I couldn't figure that out for sure. But on December 10th, so all this shit happened on December the 8th, right? So then on December the 10th, 86, Frank returned to the house to get some of their belongings, obviously. But before he entered, he spotted Little Psycho's face peering at him through the front window of his freaking house.
Oh, jeez.
And so obviously he immediately called the police department again, and they come in and he found, a knife stabbed into the wall like we talked about. Mm-hmm. And then they freaking arrested the little shit again. And he was charged at this time with breaking and entering of a dwelling, 4 counts of kidnapping for Frank, Tina, Karen, and Kathy, who is so strange, this Kathy situation. I don't even know what to tell you about it, but I include it because I found it in the research, but it's like I'm the only one talking about it, so I don't know for sure. But he was also charged with 4 counts of armed assault in a dwelling, larceny, and malicious destruction of property, which is damages over $100. And because he was a juvenile, he was initially held in a state Department of Youth Services detention center, a juvenile detention facility. He remained in that facility for about 10 months until his case was transferred to adult court in October of 1987. Once he was transferred to adult court, then he was arraigned and his bail was set at $10,000. And his mom, a woman by the name of Elaine, was able to secure the money and get his release on October the 9th, 1987. And she actually took out a second mortgage on her home to get him out. LaPlante returned to live with his mother and his stepfather in Townsend while he was awaiting trial. And his trial for all of this shit was scheduled for December 11th of 1987. So following all this weird shit with this little freaking psychopath, police strongly advised Frank and his daughters to leave their home immediately for their own safety. And so during this period of time, the family stayed in various places, kind of all over, hotels some nights with relatives, other nights, never feeling safe enough to return to their home on Lawrence Street. And the trauma was so deep that before LaPlante's arrest, Frank had listed his house for sale in the Boston Herald in November of 86. And following months of all of the weird shit and then coming face to face with a freaking cross-dressing psychopath dressed up in freaking mayonnaise mousse and ketchup on his face. And I mean, shit don't get any weirder than this story. I'm telling you what. And so then when he was released on bail, the Bowens abandoned their house altogether. Some reports indicate that they moved into a hotel. Others say they eventually relocated out of state, which they did end up moving out of state eventually. But during this period of time, it's really hard to track exactly where they were at because
that's how they wanted it.
Yeah, and they're living a transient existence. And this is a family that's already gone through enough shit. And now they have to abandon their house because they let this little psychopath out of freaking jail. And so obviously the emotional and financial strain was immense on this poor family. Frank described himself as being absolutely broke, and the family is being emotionally disturbed by the whole ordeal. And Frank was publicly furious over the bail ruling. He called LaPlante highly dangerous and even stated that he'd take justice into his own hands if the courts wouldn't. So basically, he was like, you either lock this little psychopath up or I'm going to kill him, because if he comes near my daughters again, I'm going to kill the son of a bitch. And I can completely relate with this guy.
Yeah.
I would be exactly the same way. And after what he did, even in 1986, $10,000 is not enough bail for this little psychopath.
No. It's too attainable.
Yes. So immediately after he was released on bail, this little piece of shit resumed his pattern of burglary and theft. So 5 days after getting out, he stole 2 Ruger 22 caliber guns and a pile of cash from a neighbor. And he consistently lied to his family, who found evidence of his crimes, but just accepted his false explanations. I mean, they were either just completely oblivious or lying to themselves or in denial, or I don't know. I mean, if your kid was arrested for, first of all, I think what you mentioned earlier gets to this point. How is this little psycho allowed to live in the walls? Where in the hell are his parents?
Yeah.
Why are they not? Where were you?
Yeah.
You get your ass home by this time every day.
Exactly.
You know, like, it seems like.
Especially when her house is on the line.
Right. You'd think that, I mean, you would really think that, I don't know. I think they're a big part of the problem is what I'm getting at. So for the next several weeks, he continued breaking into local homes, including the first burglary of a home that was owned by the Gustafsons, who we will be talking about, where he stole electronics and coins that he then hid at his brother's house. And then he began seeking 22 caliber bullets. He stole the 22 caliber guns, and then he started seeking bullets for these guns. And so he was asking his friends.
He had friends?
Apparently.
Okay.
Asking his friends for 22 caliber bullets. And then he began rehearsing the use of these weapons. He was basically play acting, using these weapons for further violence. And so he obviously showed signs of premeditation. He was practicing with the firearms and planning much more serious crimes. Despite being on bail and under suspicion for other terrifying offenses, no significant supervision was present that would prevent him from repeating and even intensifying his criminal patterns, which I think is a failure on every front. I think it's a failure that there's not a probation officer freaking in this kid's, following this kid around in his life at all times. I think it's an absolute failure that his parents bail his ass out of jail for,
Just let him do whatever he wants afterwards.
Yeah, we're not talking about somebody stealing a package of Wrigley gum from the freaking corner store. Mm-hmm. He freaking broke into and lived inside a home while terrorizing a family for months. It just blows my mind. So obviously, with no real restrictions and mounting evidence of his danger, he committed very heinous acts. So we need to talk about the Gustafson family. So they were a loving, close-knit household that lived in Townsend, Massachusetts. So it was a family of Andrew Gustafson, who was the father. He was a respected small-town attorney who was known for his compassion, kindness, and devotion to his family. Priscilla Jean Morgan Gustafson, who was born January the 13th, 1954, who was the mom. She was a warm, nurturing, and active mother and a well-liked nursery school teacher in the community. She was 33 years old at this time and several months pregnant with their third child. And then there's Abigail Gustafson, who was the first child, who was born December the 8th, 1979. She was described as a joyful and loving child who was curious and who was about to celebrate her 8th birthday. And then there was William Gustafson, who was the younger child. He was born November the 12th, 1982, making him 5 years old at this time. And he was described as funny and playful and very affectionate. And then, like I said, they were expecting another child at this time. And so Andrew and Priscilla met at Worcester State College and married in 1975. Andrew later graduated from Boston College Law School in 1978, and the couple moved from Ashby to Townsend soon thereafter. And they settled at their home at 3 Saunders Road in Townsend, which was surrounded by woods and offered the children a peaceful, really idyllic environment to grow up in. And the Gustafsons were active in the Townsend Congregational Church, fostering close ties in their faith community. And Priscilla's teaching role at a local nursery school made her well known among parents and children in Townsend. And the children, Abigail and William, were, quote, wide-eyed and curious, funny, noisy, kind, and innocent. And that was according to many reports by their friends and stuff. So the family was described as loving and supportive. They were involved in school events, church activities, and just the daily joys of small town life. On a typical day, Priscilla would take William to his babysitter, and then she would run her errands and whatever, take care of her teaching duties, because like I said, she was a nursery school teacher. Abigail was old enough that she was in school, and so she rode the bus to school and then home in the afternoons, and she was always eager to see her mom and her little brother. Andrew worked long but fulfilling hours in his law practice, calling Priscilla when work would allow him to do so, and he really made his family his top priority. On December the 1st, 1987, Andrew had just closed on a significant real estate deal and was looking forward to celebrating with Priscilla that evening. And there was nothing to suggest that the family had any concerns for their safety. They lived in a peaceful community where doors were often left unlocked. They were, by all accounts, the very model of a loving, hopeful, and community-oriented Massachusetts family with strong faith, deep friendships, and a future full of promise. Throughout the afternoon of December the 1st, Andrew called the house several times, at least 3 different times between 3:30 p.m. and 5 o'clock p.m., hoping to share his good news about this real estate deal that he'd closed and arrange an evening out with his wife. But Priscilla didn't answer, and he initially assumed that she might be running errands or buying groceries or whatever, especially because, this was a common part of her afternoon. She would, like we said, she'd go run errands and stuff. And so he arrived home just after 5:30 p.m., expecting his normal evening, nice night out with his wife, whatever. But instead, he found the house was eerily quiet and dark. And that was an immediate signal that something was wrong.
Yeah.
So he went into the house and he discovered Priscilla's body in the master bedroom, and then, terrified of what else he might find, he ran out of the house and he called police. He didn't search anymore. I can't say I blame the guy.
No.
I can't even begin to say what I would do. I have no clue, so I'm certainly not going to judge him. But then when the police responded and searched the house, then the children's bodies were also located inside. So this poor guy's entire family is dead, including his wife and unborn child and his 2 children. I mean, what this man went through, I just can't even begin to imagine.
Right.
What we know now is Danny LaPlante had already began to burglarize their home, starting probably on November the 16th of 87. And he stole electronic items, a phone. And when I say a phone, this was a 1987 phone.
Yeah.
Like,
rotary pull off the wall phone.
Right. He wasn't stealing a cell phone. I don't understand. But most of the shit this little idiot did, I don't understand.
Yeah.
And then likely he also took that opportunity to learn the home's layout, the family's patterns, all that kind of stuff. And then, like we said, he had acquired this 22 caliber Ruger pistol during another burglary, which he committed on October the 14th. And then he got bullets from a friend for it. And then he started practicing with it. So armed and prepared, he broke into the home in the early afternoon, believing that the house was empty. And Priscilla and her 5-year-old son returned home that day right around 1 o'clock. And they were confronted by LaPlante with a firearm in his hand.
Yuck.
And so this little psycho forced Priscilla and William into the master bedroom. He locked William in the closet, and then he tied Priscilla to the bed with some makeshift ligatures using a knotted brown sock, necktie, stockings, and pantyhose. He gagged her with a sock. Then he sexually assaulted her. After the assault, he shot her twice in the head at close range. He used a pillow to hold over the gun to help muffle the sound. And obviously, it caused extensive blood loss. He later would state that he recognized that he could have left after the rape, but he made a conscious decision to commit murder. And then since Priscilla was pregnant, LaPlante later, quote unquote, apologized, admitting that he killed 4, not 3 people. So after killing Priscilla, LaPlante removed William from the closet, took him to an upstairs bathroom, and drowned him in the bathtub.
Jeez.
Which was left with some water still in it. And then, as this little piece of shit prepared to leave, 7-year-old Abigail arrived home from school, and he coerced her into a downstairs bathroom where he drowned her in the bathtub. So Abigail suffered blunt force trauma to the head and compression of the neck, indicating that she resisted fiercely, but, she was a little girl.
Yeah.
And he was a piece of shit monster. So he was able to drown her in only a few inches of water. And then after the killings, he calmly returned home to eat. And then he attended his niece's birthday party, showing absolutely no outward signs of any emotion or concern about what he had done. The poor freaking father, and what I can't even imagine what that poor guy went through with all this shit. So obviously the police then collected evidence. They found 2 22 caliber cartridge casings. Tests would later link those to the stolen Ruger pistol. They found semen stains on the bedspread that matched LaPlante's blood type. Obviously, this is before DNA, so we only had blood typing at this time. A blue and white flannel shirt and wet gloves were discovered in the woods between both houses. Fibers from the shirt matched LaPlante's clothing, and a strand of Abigail's hair was found on his socks. And then they also found, so it was a cordless phone. It was one of those old cordless phones that he took. Not to be confused with a cell phone. This was like the old cordless phone. It was like the size of a freaking brick. They were huge,
They actually called them brick phones.
Yeah. And so, but they found the stolen phone, and he also stole a cable box from their house. And so, when they completed their searches and stuff, they found that. They also matched his sneaker prints 2 shoes that he had. And then police found an untouched beer at the scene, showing the same type of taunting, remorseless behavior that LaPlante had demonstrated terrorizing families before. He would later admit that he felt no empathy, and court psychiatrists described him as lacking any emotional response or any remorse whatsoever. LaPlante was located at the local library where he was being tutored. He was calm, and he provided a false alibi, claiming that he was watching MTV at home all day and only left when he went to his niece's birthday party. So they interviewed him, but they lacked enough hard evidence at that time. And so they knew this little shit did it, but they just didn't have the evidence yet.
Yeah.
And so they left with plans to return. And then later that day, police again approached LaPlante's home. His mother wouldn't let him in. She insisted that they call an attorney to be present. And then the cops came back a third time, and LaPlante took off and fled into the woods, an act that would later be cited as consciousness of guilt. Little shit knew what he did was wrong. And so a warrant was issued for his arrest, and then a manhunt began. And it became one of the largest in Massachusetts history, involving state and local police, helicopters, canine units, and search parties. His escape spanned Pepperell and all the surrounding areas. He burglarized a home that was owned by a family called the McGovernors. He stole 3 guns, and then he escaped out of a window when police came. Likely the police showing up probably saved lives, because this little psychopath probably would have killed this family when they come home too. He attempted but failed to break into another home owned by Jonathan Lang, and he broke into Pamela Michaela's Elm Street home, held her at gunpoint, and then forced her to drive him to her in her orange Volkswagen van, and Michaela escaped by jumping from the moving van, and then LaPlante drove off alone. So again, he probably would have killed her too. And then the van was later spotted in Ayer, Massachusetts, where LaPlante was seen running into a lumber yard and threatening the owner with a gun. So police surround the area. LaPlante was ultimately found hiding in a dumpster. He was arrested without any further violence. And during the strip search, officers recovered the stolen .32 caliber revolver, which he had hidden in his underwear, and then he had a bullet in his sneaker. After the arrest, this worthless pile of freaking psychotic shit pled not guilty to all charges, and he was ordered to Bridgewater State Hospital for psychiatric evaluation, which this little psycho desperately needs. And this time, bail was denied, thank God. So this escalation from cold post-murder normalcy to desperate armed flight and imminent danger to other innocent people closed the loop in one of the darkest crimes in Massachusetts history. So then this little psychopath needs to go to trials. Like I said, he pleaded not guilty on December 4th of 87 to 3 counts of first-degree murder, and he was immediately held without bail, ordered to undergo 20 days of psychiatric evaluation, and then was found competent to stand trial. So a grand jury returned a bill of indictment against him with 28 counts encompassing the 3 murders, the related felonies, the additional offenses from the Bowen home invasions, and crimes that occurred during the manhunt. And the trial focused on the murder charges first, as conviction rendered other cases largely moot. The trial began in October of 1988 at Middlesex Superior Court in Lowell, with LaPlante tried as an adult. So this goes back in forensic history quite a ways. So LaPlante was a type A secretor, which means he secretes his blood type in his bodily fluids, such as semen. So there's secretors and non-secretors. Secretors Their blood type is present. Non-secretors, it's not present. He was a secretor and of type A blood, which matched the semen stains that were found on Gustafson's bedspread. And then the hair from Abigail Gustafson was found on his sock, indicating obviously close physical contact during the struggle and the murders. And then fibers from the shirt, which we already talked about, were found in the woods, which matched those on LaPlante's clothing, and fibers from the gag used on Priscilla. The .22 caliber handgun used in the murders was conclusively linked to LaPlante and traced to the burglary that he had committed weeks earlier. And then, like I alluded to before, when he ran, that was consciousness of guilt. So they can easily say, of course, the little psychopath is guilty. Freaking took off running. We had to have a huge manhunt for the little psychopath. The defense was led by Robert Casey, and he attacked the technicalities of the evidence, including the validity of the search warrant, and suggested that LaPlante had been a scapegoat. He hinted to insanity due to the bizarreness of the crimes, but presented no substantial case for criminal insanity. The judge refused an insanity instruction to the jury due to the lack of any supporting evidence, and LaPlante did not testify. So after just 5 hours of deliberation on October the 26th, 1988, the jury found this piece of shit guilty of all 3 murders. Judge Robert Barton imposed the maximum sentence, 3 consecutive life terms without parole. So once this little shit dies, he owes us 2 more lives. The piece of shit.
We're going to take him.
So the judge stated his regret that Massachusetts didn't have the death penalty, saying, quote, "I personally could pull the switch," end quote. Hoorah, 100%.
Yeah.
Hats off, Judge. Nice work. He made it very clear that the intent was for LaPlante to spend quote, "spend the rest of your life behind bars with no parole, no commutation, and no furloughs," end quote. Prosecutors dropped the remaining Bowen and manhunt-related charges because, well, he's already going to die 3 times before he gets another chance.
Yeah.
So the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court affirmed LaPlante's conviction and life sentence at appeal in 1993, rejecting claims about evidence suppression and the insanity instruction. Then there was a landmark Supreme Court ruling that outlaws a life sentence without parole for juveniles, which prompted a review, leading to a 2017 resentencing hearing. And I don't know if you're familiar with this. I mean, it's a landmark case. It comes up so often. Basically, the Supreme Court said that if a juvenile is convicted of a crime, he cannot be sentenced to life without parole unless that is reviewed later.
Oh, okay.
And so in March of 2017, when this piece of shit was 47, he sought a reduction in his sentence. He apologized in court. Expert psychiatric testimony refuted his remorse as genuine and described him as highly antisocial and lacking any empathy. Victim impact statements also urged maximum punishment. And so Judge Helena Kazajian resentenced LaPlante to 3 consecutive life sentences with the possibility of parole after 45 years, which was the harshest punishment available by the law. The crime's brutality and LaPlante's lack of any rehabilitation weighed heavily. I mean, he was a piece of shit in 1987, and then he was a piece of shit in 2017. He is a freaking sociopath. He does not have the ability to feel remorse. He doesn't.
Right.
He could give 2 shits. I mean, he killed 2 little kids. He drowned 2 little kids in the bathtub. It don't get any worse than that. Flat out doesn't get worse than that. This guy's a freaking monster. If a death penalty is ever warranted, it is warranted for this piece of shit.
Yeah.
100%. So in 2019, The piece of shit appealed again, seeking parole after 30 to 35 years. The Supreme Court unanimously denied his request, stating his punishment fit both the crime scale and his character as an offender. So, kiss my ass, go back to jail and die.
Yep.
He is incarcerated at MCI Norfolk. His first parole eligibility date is in 2033, when he will be 62 years old. He's continued to file lawsuits for various prisoner rights complaints. I mean, he is just the quintessential piece of shit. I hate this guy. So there you have it. There you have this freaking weird ass case. Did I lie to you? Is this like,
No,
is this fitting for
messed up,
October freaking creepy ass horror? Like, Stephen King couldn't do better than this. This little freaking psychopath was living in their walls. How the Bowens, and thank God they did, but how the Bowens survived this psycho is really miraculous, because he's obviously a killer. He was a killer when he was in their house. He just hadn't done it yet, but he had the mentality of a killer. He freaking attacked him with an axe. Thank God that Frank was there and was able to get the door shut and lock this little psycho out. But yeah, and before we close, do you have any thoughts or input on this insane case?
I honestly can't believe I didn't know anything about it. I mean, I've heard of the frogging incidences, but I've never heard this one.
Yeah, and like, I mean, it's not the only case where like somebody was living in. I mean, it's the only one that I'm aware of where somebody was actually living in the walls.
Yeah.
But I've heard of them like living in the attic and shit like that.
Oh yeah.
He was living in their. I don't know, man. It's just so freaking creepy. And then, you know, to come home and not only find somebody in your house, but to find a psychopath in a dress with an axe with condiments smeared all over him. Like, I don't know, man. It's like I said, man, this shit is stranger than fiction.
It's very, yes.
So, home should be where the fear ends, but for the Bowens, the fear began inside their very walls. Every knock in the night, every scrape of wood, every whisper in the dark was not a ghost, but a predator waiting in silence. He wanted them to think it was their imaginations. He wanted them to believe their grief had twisted into hallucinations, but it wasn't. It was Danny LaPlante, a boy who turned himself into the monster of their home, a boy who wrote messages across their walls in ketchup and mayonnaises, though each word was carved into their sanity. A boy who crawled through crawl spaces like a living shadow, drilling peepholes to watch children sleep until finally he emerged with an axe in his hands. And the scariest part? He wasn't supernatural. He wasn't a demon or a phantom from beyond. He was flesh and blood, a reminder that the real monsters don't need myths to make them terrifying. Halloween is the season when we decorate our porches with jack-o'-lanterns, when we laugh at haunted houses, when shadows seem to stretch longer across the ground. But the story of Danny LaPlante strips away the laughter and replaces it with something colder. The creak in the floorboards, the scratching of dry leaves against the window, the faint sound of knocking from a place no one should be. And while his crimes began like a ghost story, they ended in something even darker. The murders of the Gustafson family. Priscilla, just 33 years old and pregnant with her third child. Abigail, a bright and curious 7-year-old, and William, only 5. Still in the age of laughter and play, their names, not his, are the ones that we remember tonight. Their lives matter far more than the shadow who stole them. So, when you blow out your candles this October, when you watch the carved grin of a jack-o'-lantern flicker and fade, when the house settles in the quiet hours before sleep, ask yourself, Is it really the wind that you're hearing? Or is it something else? Something closer? Something already inside? Because you don't need ghosts to be haunted. You only need someone who knows how to hide. So this does it for this episode of Dark Dialogue. If tonight's story left you unsettled, that's because it should. The true horrors are never in the movies. They're in the lives interrupted, in the victims we remember, and in the shadows of the places we once thought were safe.
And it's October, which means we'll be bringing you more cases this month that carry that Halloween chill. Stories that feel like nightmares, but are tragically all too real.
If you found tonight's episode powerful, help us keep going. Hit that like button, give us a thumbs up, and share this episode with your friends.
And don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Leave us a review. It helps us grow, helps more people find the show, and keeps the dialogue alive.
If you'd like to support us further, join our community. You can back the show on Patreon or on Ko-fi, or get involved with victim advocacy through the Adopt a Victim program or the Dark Dialogue Collective. You can play a direct role in helping to research, remember, and keep alive the stories of those who deserve justice.
Your support means everything to us and to the families who continue to live in the shadow of these crimes.
Until next time, keep your candles lit, your doors locked, and above all, keep the dialogue alive.